Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala barakatuh. Alhamdulillah. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad. We are very happy today to have this Facebook live session with a very special guest. And the special guest is none other than Sister Aisha Gray. And of course, tonight will be a little bit different. It's not going to be a lecture. It's going to be a conversation with her. She is the, we'll go into her bio a little bit more later on. But inshallah, we're looking forward to have this conversation with her on her publishing house and also the projects. But with this conversation, we also have the founder and director of Saud Ilahi, Sidi Khalid Ajmain.
Yeah, mashallah. Thank you, Abu Sufyan. And what an honor and a blessing to have Sister Aisha Gray. And the first time I met her was in Singapore when she attended our Tasawuf conference organized by Masjid Abdul Alim Siddiq, run by Sidi Nasir. And mashallah, what a beautiful woman and warm, warm person who has so much to share with us on her journey, her work. It's true. Yeah. So her work, her journey, and I'm always mesmerized, and I was very happy to see her. In fact, I was one of those who recommend to invite her in 2006 for that conference because I
Thank you very much.
Yeah, welcome. Because I felt she got so much to share, I would say, right?
Yeah. But Bismillah, even before we begin, let me just read her bio so that those who are just tuning in can just catch up. Bismillah. So Sister Aisha Gray Henry became an international lecturer and publisher of world religions after completing a program in Islamic studies at Cairo's Al-Azhar University. She co-founded and directed the Islamic Text Society in Cambridge while completing an MA in education. In 1997, she founded Fons Vitae, an educational charity focused on the spiritual heritage of Islam, which was honored at 2015 Congress in Morocco. MashaAllah. Mr. Khalid, Bismillah.
Yeah, mashallah. Looking at her biography while you were reading, you know what kind of lady this is.
Indeed.
It's just saying these things. The one thing I've learned from Ghazali is we can take no credit at all because, what happened is in the 5th book of the Ihya Ulumuddin on charity, zakat, when I wrote that for the children's version, I thought, zakat, 2.5%, that kind of a thing, a mud of grain. And it wasn't that at all. The children in the story, I have to share this with you, are on a merry-go-round and they notice there are other children who don't have even the change, the wherewithal to go. And they're a little shabby and they run to their teacher, Hajj Abdullah, who's sort of the saintly man who feeds birds in his hand. And they meet him in the magic secret garden and they pass an old man saying, Lillah, Lillah, begging. And they run in and they say to Hajj Abdullah, why are some people rich and some people poor? And Hajj Abdullah says, first go and give that man some change. If someone reaches out, you don't disappoint. And by saying lillah, he's saying for God, yes, but it belongs to God. Inna lillahi, surely we belong to God. And when they return, he said, children, and I'm saying this to you, CD, and to all of the friends that are listening in, is that what it is that who we are, our strengths, our qualities, our skills, our connections, everything we have, we didn't give ourselves. We didn't give our parents or where we are. Everything is a specific loan. It's an amana, a trust from God. And then you realize, well, then how can I take credit for anything I did? So now we're always told to be humble. Well, how do you be humble? Well, if you just stand back and look at, here I am, and then here's this person, Gray, who's been given all these qualities, and then he sends me sends her things to do. And so it's him serving himself through himself. And we are nobody. Mashallah. So once you get the nobodiness, you're free,
Mashallah.
And I have to just end with two other things. Ghazali's stories are so far out. And then you realize when you read Rumi or anything, everybody took his stories and he gives how not to give and how to give, how not to give. This man was told by the king, Yani Allah, go into the town and feed these hungry people. You have lands, which I have given you. but the man who has fruits and meats, he thinks they're his. Like, don't we think what we have? You know, when I give charity, don't I think I'm giving from what I earned?
Yeah.
We're not. So then he goes and he holds the plate of food high, and the people reach up and they're made to feel low. How many times do we give charity and we're giving down, right? Someone reaches up in the street and they have to feel less. That is the wrong way to give. And also the people think, now we owe him something, you know, correct way to give. So in the story, the orphan raised by people of wealth teach him money. And the king says, go to that old widow. She needs money to educate her children. This is the way to give, everybody. So you go, and he knelt low and he held the plate of gold low.
Yes.
And then he looked up into her face and said, oh, blessed lady, I beg you to receive what I bring on behalf of the king in order that I may fulfill my loan, my amana to God. Amen. And that changed my life, that story, you know, because every moment we're seeing where people are reaching out to us, even if it's just for information or a smile.
Yes.
But you see, but we've been given in time and space, we've been put with that person to serve them. I mean, Ghazali is unbelievable. Anyway, go back to your interview. I just had to say that.
No, it's amazing sharing. Yeah, really very valuable stuff.
Something that we need in the beginning, because it begins with Allah. And alhamdulillah, we thank Allah for all this. And before we get into what you had done, right? How is it your journey begin? Because I'm mesmerized with your travel in Egypt and few other places, and how is it that from your soul searching, I would say, to the point that you start to do publishing the works of all the big scholars and the awliya, right? So we like to hear.
Well, all right. In the 60s, I graduated from university in Hinduism. I studied Hinduism. I was interested in the Vedanta, the underlying metaphysical principles underneath of everything, which is true for all faith, whether it's Allah and the 99 names, or in the Eastern Church, the essence and the divine energies. Anyway, so Islam wasn't even taught in the 60s in world religion. We had the idea it was something like 1,001 nights and camels and harems, because it was nothing in the news. And then I got out of college and friends of mine started dying in car accidents and stuff. And I wondered what happens to them when they die. And we weren't getting many answers in our church. And I really wanted to understand death. So I started studying all these religions. And then when I got out of college, I happened to read in the New York Public Library, Imam al-Ghazali's Munqidh min ad-Dalal in English, his Deliverance from Error, his personal autobiography. And when I read this line, Ghazali said, I'm on a crumbling bank. And then he speaks to his own soul. And he said, up, up and away. If not now, when? And that's what we're all up against, aren't we? This is our condition. We all know it all, but we don't do it all. And then we think, do we even believe it if we're not doing it? I mean, I was like, couldn't believe it. And then I had met my Venezuelan husband to be, and we were reading all of these books. He was raised a Catholic, and he very much wanted to be like St. Francis of Assisi. And in his church group, his catechism, the priest said to the boys, what do you want to be when you grow up? And the boys said, doctor, lawyer, fireman. And Fyodor said, that's not be, that's do. I want to be like St. Francis. And then of course, the priest said, but my son, that's only for the elect. And he thought, well, then what's all the religion for? So in the end, he's reading about the living saints of North Africa. And one day he wrote a letter to Azhar University and said, I would like to come and teach film direction there, not knowing Azhar is totally Islamic, and study Islamic studies. And they actually wrote back and said, we give you and your wife a scholarship to Venerable Al-Azhar. This is in 1967. And so we took the letter, we went to Washington, D.C., we got the letter, the visa, and then we got on a freighter. We decided to do the slow Hajj and sailed over with 8 people to Tangiers, bought a Citroën, those gray little vans that we drove all over Morocco for months. And then we lived with the Bedouins on their way to Timbuktu in tents. Finally, we were in Algeria, went to the south with people who looked like they were out of the Old Testament. By the time we reached Libya, which had a king, King Idris, Allah yarhamu, I was 9 months pregnant.
Wow.
So we stopped in the far edge of Beida, one of the three capitals, because you have to remember that Israel was still bombing Egypt from the 67 war. It didn't stop in 67, it continued. So we didn't see how can we go into Egypt and have a baby with bombs dropping.
Yeah.
So we stayed in Libya for many, many months. And of course, that was great because we met a whole community of the Filipinos, Nur Musawati, who became the head of the Mujahideen. We know everything about the Philippines. You know, we can cook Filipino food. And then we had our Nigerian friends and all the rest. And our daughter, Hajj was born. We named her Hajj because we were Muhajirin. فَمَنْ كَانَتْ هِجْرَتُهُ إِلَى اللَّهِ وَرَسُولِهِ. So anyway, we named her Hajj. And so finally we took her into Egypt when she was 2 months old. And we went directly at Azhar to the desk of Abdul Halim Mahmoud, Allah yarhamu, who finally became the Sheikh al-Islam. I mean, I'm crying thinking of him. He was there with his prayer beads at his desk. It was so beautiful. And he said, you know, Azhar is in Arabic. I don't know who invited you here. Whoa. And you're going to be poor. So you're going to get jobs. And Farid had 3 jobs. He taught Spanish at Azhar, film direction at Cairo, and worked for the radio. And I taught at the Azhar Girls' School, art and English. And little Mustafa was soon born in 71. So we went every afternoon to the office of Sheikh Abdul Halim when he left at 2 with our baby. And they brought teachers who knew English to teach us fiqh and tajweed and hadith. And then all of our people came from Japan. We knew people from Italy, England, France. Everyone was coming together to Cairo because they were looking for the same thing that they couldn't find in their own traditions, the presence of saints. So there we are with Sheikh Abdul Halim, Sheikh Saleh al-Jafri at Al-Azhar, Sheikh Hafiz Tijani. We are facing these mountains of people. And you know, we finally saw what we wanted to be. You see what I'm saying? Because you can read all the books, you can read Ibn Ta'ala, but when you see it living, someone who's calm and present and at one, right? Then you know where you're headed, and that's what you want to imitate, you see, or that's what you want to be. So we stayed in Egypt for 10 years. My grandfather had been there for 27 years, from 25 to 52. He was a judge under the kings in the mixed courts. But in those days, they knew nothing about Islam. But we had my family, a long history in Egypt. So then Farid began working in Saudi Arabia, working with the King Abdulaziz University, with Sami Ankawi and Mahmoud Rash, with the Hajj Research Center. We started doing Hajjas. I made a couple of Hajjas in the 70s and, you know, lots of Umrahs. And then the 80s, then finally in 79, we'd been on a trip around the world to do a film on the Hajj. We visited the Muslims in Taipei, Kyoto, Indonesia. We met our family. And so we came back and Farid said, here comes the Islamic Text Society. You know, all the books that are in English that we've been reading are really crummily produced. They're ugly, they're not beautiful. The scholarship may be good, but I mean, it's a mess. And he loved books and he could read many languages. So he said, we're going to open the Islamic Text Society. So we shut the door in our house in Cairo. We kept it for every winter to come back. And we moved with the children in 79 to a little village outside of Cambridge. And the Text Society started in our living room, just like Fons Vitae. My office is the kitchen and Fons Vitae is in the basement and garage. We don't do overhead because we're charities, right? Yes. So we started in the living room with the help of Amir Muhammad al-Faisal and finally later Sheikh Zaki Yamani, which made us possible to have a building in Cambridge with a bookstore, the Green Street bookstore. And so for 10 years, we started with, of course, Sirah and many things, but we began the Ghazali series. Abdul Hakim Winter was just getting out of Pembroke. He already was a genius with languages. he did Death and What Comes After, and then followed on with On Breaking the Two Desires. And so I've known him, and I just went with him to Bosnia last year, and I worked with him in Bosnia during the war. So it's like a family. We're a group, a family. Each generation has a group, and you all are the next group, I suppose. I don't know what age you are. So anyway, to finish the story, so we lived in England. That's where I did a degree in curriculum development and education. I started a doctorate, which I've done all the research for, but I don't have time to write up, and I don't need a doctorate because Ghazali is more important. So, so we lived there, and the children grew up, and my daughter went back to Cairo to study at the American University. She likes Egypt. She's very Egyptian. She lives in England now with her daughters, Layla, and her husband, Mustafa, and her daughters, Safiya. And then my son, Mustafa, after he finished high school, he went to India for a year. And then after that, he went to Cambridge and then did law in SOAS. But now he's here in Louisville with me, and he is the new associate director of Fons Vitae. And he's the one, all these films you're seeing and all this marketing, he's doing it. I never marketed. I just publish a book and hope somebody knew it existed, you know. So then after 10 years, and this is getting this to Fons Vitae, after 10 years in England, 11, my mother and father here in Kentucky got very ill. My father was an architect, and we're 8th generation Louisvillians. Louisville downtown was a land grant from George Washington, and we founded the first Anglican cathedral. And so my father had his legs cut off because he had gangrene, and mother was on a walker, and they were talking about a nursing home. Well, we know the mother, the parents are the ultimate to the last breath. So I thought, it's their turn. They thought of me first when I was a little girl. It's their turn. So the children were in college, and I came, and Theodore went to his country, to Venezuela, to try to help his mother. And I lived here, and I was able to even hold my father's hand as he died, and my mother. And then sort of when he died, I was seeing one of our best friends in Libya was Haris Salajic. He was a great friend of ours, and he had become the prime minister of Bosnia. So I saw him on TV, and then I went and worked in the Bosnian refugee camps, and Abdul Hakim was doing so much, and finally published the Life of the Prophet for Children that we did in Cambridge. I am Layla Azam in Bosnian, and the little booklet, Understanding Islam and the Muslims, et cetera, and we got all that to Bosnia. Then I got involved with the Muslims of Tibet, and that's a huge thing, and did a lot on the Muslims of Tibet. And then in 1997, the thought came up, I want to go back into publishing. So Fons Vitae, Abdul Hakim Winter named it Fons, Fountain, Al-Kawthar of Life, you know. So we opened up, so we created Fons Vitae, and the idea was to make it world spirituality with the emphasis on Islamic spirituality. And so it's been going, I guess, nearly 20 years, just about, let's see, well, more. Yeah, 23 years have just shot by. And I want to say to everyone out there, I don't know how old you are, but when you hit 50, your life begins at 50, because by the time you're 50, your kids are finally who they're going to be. You know, there's nothing more you can do. They've got their own lives. Yes. And secondly, by the time you're 50, you have all the possibilities you have in your soul, your tendencies, all those things Allah has given you, right? And your connections, you like have your gift to give. Everyone's got a particular gift to give. And finally, you, from age 50 to 75, I'm 77 now, Inshallah. The whole thing happened. Everything happened because I was free. I had done my service as a mother, right? And suddenly I got my life back. And your life really begins at 50. And that 25 years, that quarter of a century is where you make your big gift. So that's the story. All right. Is that all you wanted to know?
MashaAllah. We can write a book on it and a documentary on it, MashaAllah. I think it's amazing because when I first saw Fons Vitae itself, I was really attracted to it, and perhaps because I'm into Sufism and the saints and all that, and I really grew on it, and I bought a lot of your books through
Oh,
Wardah
that makes
Books.
me so happy.
And that's why we invited you a long time ago, mashallah. And we were always keen to see you to learn, and you know, to be able to understand our own journey, right? So it started with Islamic Text Society, right? And the Imam Ghazali work, and I had some of it, like I mentioned to you earlier before we went live. The Deaf book, The Remembrance of Death, and I think that's like my wife's favorite. And she told me that when she sleep, she kind of weep when she read that book.
Oh,
So what was your experience like, because I saw like there's so many saints book that you had produced, you published. How was it like your experience in doing every book? And we shall start with Imam Ghazali, The Remembrance of Death. How is it like?
well, we're doing the Ibn Ta'Allah series as well. And when we were in Cairo, we Sheikh Abdul Halim Mahmoud, Allah Yarhamu, wanted to know where Ibn Ta'Allah was actually buried. They knew the area, Al-Wafi'iyya, but no one knew where he was actually buried. And he sent two friends of his out, to actually people we knew, to try and find it. And they actually had people digging, and they one day dug a hole and they smelt a perfume, not of this world. And they dug down, and there he was, intact. Nothing had happened to him since the 1200s. And they covered immediately and built a little marker. And then they built a big, beautiful mosque to go there next to it. And I remember the opening of that mosque. And so that really struck me, and and in that graveyard up there, it was wonderful. One of our friends said to us, the sheikh, he said, now, you all have been here for years. You could die here. So my family graves are right here. So this is for you, Aisha, this piece of dust. And I was like, very sobering. There it is. And you're looking way over there, and the pyramids are on the other side of the river. So that was sort of a beginning of how do you preserve this material for people. And I know the big event we had in Morocco, they did a huge congress at the Menara Palace and brought all of our books and scholars to talk about Fons Vitae. And I said, why? And they said, because you're preserving our spiritual heritage in the West. So I think that's what our function has been, that we didn't know what drew us to Islam was the spiritual possibilities for ourselves, the guidance you get in these books. So that's what led to the production of these books, is because if you read them carefully, and they're hard, you pick up. I remember Martin Ling said, you don't have to worry if you hear a lecture and you can't remember all of it, or you read a book and you can only, you remember what you need. So we all will have the one paragraph that does it for us, and do underline your books, because those underlinings are what you need. And just to go back to the Book of Death of Ghazali, which the brother was speaking of, Ghazali is difficult to read. And the books done by Abdul Hakim and the Text Society are highly scholarly, with scholarly language and endless footnotes and all of this. And I picked up about 8 years ago the Book of Death and tried to read it myself. All right. I don't get the chance to really read the books I publish because I don't have time. So I thought, I'm going to read this. I love Islam. Ghazali brought me in, and I'm doing the children's series. The children's series didn't exist. So suddenly I start to try to read it, and it was too hard. It wasn't that it was too hard reading it line by line, but it was so azim, so high, that when I shut the book, I was still me. I couldn't absorb it, because the problem is that each thing he says is so deep and has so many levels. And then the Quran and the Hadith passages, well, you can't even imagine that. So how can you read along at that level and go deeper and deeper, and then hold it, and then shut the book and see your life through those ideas. And it scared me to death. I thought, I've been publishing this stuff for my whole life and I'm still me, you know, and that was scary. And then glory to God, right? Hamza Yusuf calls, he says his children, you know, like the Islamic education isn't working out for them, you know, because I guess they're memorizing things. And he's crying and I'm crying. I now have grandchildren who are going to be on iPhones and the whole thing. So then he said, what about Ghazali for children? And I'm thinking, of course. People would say, you must be crazy, right? So we just began. And so, I mean, this was nearly 10 years ago. And so we got, then Hamza wanted to use the Ihya Ulumuddin. There is a press called Dar al-Minhaj in Jeddah, and they brought out the most recent critical edition of all of the Ihya, which each volume has all the manuscripts from everywhere. So it's the one that has everything in it. So I ordered the huge set. It was sent by a friend of us, Hisham Ali Reza, to us in Kentucky. And then we would give scholars just the book that they're working on, like the Book of Knowledge. And we only gave the scholars who understood this from within. You don't give Ghazali to someone who's just an engineer who knows English. So Abdul Hadi Honorkamp, who did Tirmizi and everything else, we gave him the Book of Knowledge. And he was busy with Abad al-Runda, and he really didn't want to do the Book of Knowledge. And I said, who's going to read Abad al-Runda? Children will. I said, he's going to look down from heaven and say, go for Ghazali first. So he worked for how long on the Book of Knowledge? And then I took his translation, and that then went to our editors, who are Ghazali experts, who spent years putting the language in an English that could actually be read by parents and teachers, right? More readable, but still the same, scholarly. And then I would sit with that manuscript while they were polishing it up and checking the references, and sit there. And I went through the whole thing. I would circle every key idea, select some of the ahadith and some of the Quranic passages, because I thought there might be some family in Bangladesh and this is the only time they're going to get Ghazali. I have to be, every idea has got to be in there, and may I be inspired to be able to present it in a simpler form. So I pretended that I was whispering to my granddaughter, Layla. And how would I say this idea? And I sat on this couch right behind me for 4 years for the Book of Knowledge. That was how hard it was. So that's how the Ghazali series got going, because of the Book of Death, because it was too hard for me. So there you are.
MashaAllah. But I think, Sister Aisha, I think what's very interesting is Fons Vitae, besides just being a publishing house, you also have events on world religions and on prison outreach, you know, and even school programs. Like, I mean, that's quite multidisciplinary in that sense. Why would you say Fons Vitae actually expanded into that community outreach as well?
Well, you know, I've always been interfaith, you know, because the thing every person on earth loves about God, the thing they want most is his mercy, Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. That's what we want most. So how could we worship a God who is merciful and have him trick every other group but us, you know? So it must mean everyone is getting what they're supposed to be getting, you know, and in their way, in their package. And so I've always been that way, you know, and of course there are people who say our way is the only way, and in Islam there are a million groups saying everybody's going to hell but us, you know, the whole thing. But I'm just not that way naturally. So of course one wants to share and look at the common beautiful ideas. Just something beautiful though I have to share with you. Ghazali in the Book of Hajj, which we're just finishing now, it's going to press inshallah in 2 weeks. He says, the pilgrimage, and we're all on a journey, right? Our life is a pilgrimage that ends in death. The Hajj is a pilgrimage that ends in death of all. You're in your shroud, you're in your grave clothes. And Ghazali said, what else would you wear to visit God except grave clothes? Meaning you've finally died to everything in your being and your life except him. That's the idea. So, but he's in the text, he's saying, when you leave on pilgrimage, you have to not only ask forgiveness from everything you've ever done. You want to leave everything in order. You want to have said goodbye, asked everyone, I'm sorry I said that. And then you have to be ready to travel with the bare necessities. And your goal should be purely the remembrance of God. Now, that should be the way our life is, right? But he's talking about these are the essences of departure for the pilgrimage. And then he said, isn't it interesting that all traditions in the world have the same? They're all leaving. They're all putting everything at rest. They're going into their mountains. They're going into their nunneries and monasteries. The monks and the nuns, they're all going on retreat, you know, and they have to do the same thing. And then I thought, but what's the difference? In our tradition, it's not just those who have the aptitude, like a monk or a Buddhist nun, right? It is being made an obligation on every Muslim on earth who can afford to go. Why? Because in going, you know, they have to go down to the bare necessities, and they are aware of all of this. And so we've not only been given something which everybody has to do, and you think, why is the Hajj so overwhelming? I'm talking about it because we're just finishing the book right now. And why was it life-changing? Because I've sat in front of the Kaaba, mashallah, many, many times, and I'm overwhelmed. And Ghazali said, even gazing, just gazing at it is 20% of the whole of the blessings, right? Because you feel, I just want to sit and look at it. What is looking at what, right? Is it me, my little particular ego thinking, wow, here's this structure, you know, going back to Abraham, right? I realize you're looking at it with your heart, because only that is being overwhelmed. And Ghazali starts out and he explains that the Kaaba, and we know that the angels circumambulating in the throne, the arsh above, but the Kaaba, the whole thing, the black stone, that's not even in this realm. It's in another realm, which you can't see with the physical eyes. So you're seeing it with your heart. And then he says, you know, when you start at the black stone, and when you go around each time, you say, Bismillah, Allahu Akbar. But I didn't realize when you do it the first time, that's not what you say. You are bearing witness to what? And it turns out that the black stone contains inside of it the contract when Allah said to Adam, am I not your Lord? And Adam said, Naam. God said, lest on the day of judgment, you plead ignorance of this relationship. So you're starting out, and that's inside of the black stone. So you're starting your pilgrimage at the beginning before they're humankind. It's Adam only. He's there right before there's duality and manifestation of humanity. And you end when you're at Arafat, everybody in their grave clothes, all races, everybody with nothing except their good and bad inside of them. You are actually getting a preview of the last day, when all of that humanity that's come from Adam, they're all standing there together begging God's forgiveness and mercy. Can you imagine getting to do that in 6 days? A living physical preview, but it's your heart knows it too, because your heart is recognizing it. That is what we've been given. Subhanallah, you know? It's unbelievable, isn't it?
It is.
It's unbelievable. Yeah.
I think you've described it in a very profound way, and it's very beautiful. How
it's
you
Ghazali.
mentioned
It's Ghazali.
It is Ghazali, of course, but through you, Sister Aisha, mashallah.
Yeah.
And I think there are a lot of things for us to unpack. Actually, we want to talk. I don't know how long we have, but I think we'll go on, inshallah. But I think I wanted to pick on something that you mentioned. You did mention on the Ghazali children's project, right? I thought perhaps we can scope it a little bit into that, because
yes, we do have pilot schools. I didn't answer your question. We have hundreds of pilot schools, Pakistan, rural Pakistan. I give classes online just to kids in England. You know, Uzbekistan has gotten involved. Uzbekistan, it's going into Uzbekistani. And you know what? We are actually watching the thing. It was destined and it's taking off. And we've had to get into the prisons because This can help everybody. We have the prison outreach. One of our board members is in charge of that, you know, and helping with that. And like, this isn't a children's project. This is putting this message in a language that is universal. There are Christians who are reading this too, because it's the same thing in all the religions. It's the same thing. Yeah. Sorry, I interrupted you.
It's okay. It's okay. It's very interesting because on the universality of the message, I think that was a very important point. But I think I wanted to ask you, because when we look at the Ghazali Children's Project, I think what strikes as something very interesting is that it inculcates a love of the Prophet ﷺ and Allah, rather than teaching children to fear, in a sense, to do something just because you're told to do it. You know, how do you get children through storytelling? And I also know that the project has play acting, you know, it has some workshops to get children to love the Prophet ﷺ, and also to address the issues of vices of the heart. You know, perhaps you can share a little bit more. Why do you think this is important for parents raising their children in the modern age? You know, why do you think this is important?
In the social media age.
Yes, exactly that. And that as well. Yeah.
Yes, well, we're letting them use it by making their own films. Well, what you've just asked is the question. That's the whole thing. Because we, like al-muhasabi, you know, we're supposed to take account of ourselves, you know, watch what we do and change it. But children have to experience. You see, for example, my grandchildren one day weren't sharing, right? So if I say, the mother says share, she could be saying eat spinach or go to bed. It's another, if she's saying it, it's got to be not fun, right? Because she's saying do it. So what we do is, with that, for example, we say to the children, okay, play, not sharing. Oh no, you can't have this. I won't share this. You can't hold my truck. And then we say, play, act, sharing. Would you like to hold my, would you like to? And then they discover, oh, it felt good. It was easy. I didn't lose anything by it. Because in all these things we're telling them, do, until they've experienced don't be angry. Well, then just let them do anger, and then, or how they really hate listening to it. So what the system is, well, let's just say this. Ghazali opens the book of knowledge, and which is written for scholars. And I can summarize for a 5-year-old his opening statements of 4 or 5 chapters into the Ihya al-Ulumuddin in the book of knowledge. And I started with my granddaughter when she was 5. My grandchildren are all Ghazali, right? Because they were started one at 3, but she was started at 5. We're sitting in Cairo, and this is what Ghazali says. And I'm going to pretend you're a 5-year-old. All right.
Bismillah.
So, okay. Did you know there are 2 kinds of learning? And then they look up 2. Yeah. There's regular learning every day, what you're learning, but then there's the real special learning. Well, children want to know that, right?
Yes.
So the eyes widen, and then you say, well, it's how to polish your heart. What? Oh, you didn't know there are 2 hearts? There's the one that pumps the blood, and then there's the spiritual heart. You know, bless his heart. You see?
Yes.
So they're listening, but polish it. How's it get dirty? Oh, you know, if you don't share, if you don't mind mommy, whatever the age group, right? And then Layla said to me, but why do you have to polish that stuff off? Oh, didn't you know there are 2 worlds? This one we're in is brief, right? And it's got many difficulties and trials, but those are to polish your heart with. They're given to you to use to develop detachment, patience, mercy, etc. But then there's the next world, and that is where you have everything, where you're ultimately content. So you've told children who they are. They are a golden heart, right? Their true nature is not their egoic mess that mother is criticizing when she says, you're naughty. She's not talking to them. She's talking to some dust that has to be polished off. So there's no misidentification. Identify with your pure, eternal, golden nature. Secondly, they're being given what to do with their trials. And thirdly, they're being told, you don't have to worry about death. There is no death. So right away, there's a plan, you know, to go with, which is very important for children. So anyway, my granddaughter listened to the whole thing, and I always have them draw what they're listening to. So she went into the living room and her father was playing the harpsichord. And she said to him, "What's that?" He said, "I'm playing Bach, who died about 250 years ago." And she put her fists like this and she said, "He's not dead, Dad. He's in the next world." Now, this is a 5-year-old. What we're talking about is she recognized the fitra is alive. It hasn't been wrecked yet. So the earlier you get to the children, so we do two things. Children draw their hearts and they put dots on for what they want to polish away. And I don't know whether you saw that 29-minute film with the little boy, Khaled, who had the golden heart in his bedroom, and then one of them was teasing his sister. And one day he said he cleaned them all off and he said, "My heart is pure." Now, that's what al-muhasabi, parents should be doing it. A list, a checklist. If you don't have a checklist, it's all just vague in your head. So they first are doing that. And then secondly, we have them do the play acting of everything. If you go on the alghazalichildren.org, ghazalichildren.org website and go to things to do, you will see videos of kids that they've sent in from the whole world of play acting the wrong thing and the right thing. Not only is it hilarious because they get it totally, by doing it, they experience what it feels like doing the right thing. And then, of course, we ask children to play act everything. Even I have them play acting the stories. In the Book of Belief, the Book of Aqidah, where Ghazali comes through the magic door from the next world. I had my grandchildren when they were 4 and 6 acted out. And Bilal was coming through a door. And Medina, I said, "Medina, what would you like to ask Al-Ghazali?" And she's 4 years old. She said, what do you eat in the next world?" I mean, what else is she going to ask? She doesn't have any problems. So, I mean, so what it is that even with the grandchildren, if they're doing something bad, they start going like this, they're polishing their heart. So we're making that the main thing in their lives because that is the main thing. This is why we're born. This is the whole point. And if we don't give children a new lens through which to see all their troubles and their sufferings, we're working right now in Jordan to develop one of these packages for the kids in the refugee camps. Think of children in the Syrian refugee camps that have basically no physical future, but we could turn around and let them learn that these are things that they can use, their deprivations. So I have a girl who is putting this into young Arabic, all of it, that we're going to create a package for the refugee camps because we've got to do something about them, you know? So, I mean, so that the methodology is really experiencing it. You know, even the other day, a guest came and my granddaughter Medina was sitting next to me and I said, "Go and greet the guest." You know, children hate to do that. She went over and gave the weak handshake where she did this and looked away, you know, down. So I went over and I said, "Okay, do that again. Do the wrong handshake again. Weak hand looking away." And I said, "Now take the hand, look in the person's eye firmly." And she did it. And now she does it every time because she knows what to do and it felt good. So all of these things we're telling the kids to do, they really don't know what we're talking about until they really experience the horror. I don't know whether you saw the film of the little girl, The Lying Story. It was in that film. I mean, it was broken down, but you know, 2 girls, one of them breaks a vase and then mother's favorite vase. And what are we're going to blame it on the little brother. And then the mother comes in. So the children can use their media. We're asking children to make videos, you know, and get involved with the media and really enjoy it. And so it's really fun. You know, we try to, and certainly not fear-based. Even when I was doing we want people to do it because they love it, not because we're handing our children, giving them back their religion in their own hands. They're not being policed. They want to pray because it's theirs. And sure, mom should make a good place but if people are pushing them all the time, it'll only be for them. Not that we don't want them to learn and do it, but I'm not talking about hell. And it was very hard for me in the Book of Belief when you talks about crossing the bridge and there's fire below. I really made light of it. Like you have to be really bad to fall off the bridge, you know, but I mean, like even with the book of and Hajj, Al-Ghazali has these incredible du'as that he selected. And the ones that are oh God, prevent me from being in the grave with scorpions and serpents. You can bet I didn't use any of those. You know, I mean, this is not where we need to go.
SubhanAllah, there's so much to unpack in what you said. I think the message that you're trying to share is basically the methodology that Al-Ghazali Children's Project is utilizing is something that you want to inculcate the inner spirituality, that fitrah that you mentioned, that it's not lost, you see. But I think for those of them watching all around the world, perhaps some parents will be wondering, Sister Aisha, could you advise us how do we inculcate this love of the Prophet ﷺ and Allah in their children, in the things that they do day to day? Because I'm sure there are a lot of challenges that they are facing right now, and perhaps this is something very relevant, very pertinent to what they're actually experiencing, and perhaps your advice could, help them through this journey.
Well, I think to start with, we tell our children we're on a journey together. We're all on a spiritual journey, and that's what this is. It's a spiritual journey. It may look like, solid stuff, and it is, but that's what it really is. And we're doing this together, and these are the things that are come to help us, well, of course, with the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, we're talking about his sunnah, but here's the trick. We've been so overwhelmed with the outer sunnah, use the sawak stick, but finally you need to have the inner sunnah. What was the state of the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him? What is the real meaning behind that? And that's what happened with even the prayer, for example. Ghazali says, you can stand and you're thinking about something else the whole time. And he said, when the prayer opens, when you say Allahu Akbar, imagine you're standing before the King of Kings. You're not, and try at that moment to be present before him. And it'll last like 3 or 4 seconds. But maybe the next day, 6 seconds. And then whenever you're changing position, Allahu Akbar, come back. And then he says, prayer can just be like lips moving and postures. Every phrase you're saying has a different mode of being. If you're saying Subhanallah, you should be in awe. If you're saying Ihdina Sirata, you should feel contrite. So I thought, how in the world am I going to get kids to do this? I better try it myself. Well, guess what? You can't always do it. But when you try it, you're standing there and you're going slowly and you're thinking about where you are. And it's like your space opens out into like infinite light. So like he's actually giving you ways, to experience all of this. And so it's like, it's for everybody. I think the parents should say to the children, we're on a journey together and we're going to try to be like the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, on the inside, not just wear this dress or do this, but what's behind that? What is the meaning? What is that helping us to be? I think that's the trick.
MashaAllah. That's very well said. To be. Yeah. Thank you so much, Sister Aisha. I think we want to talk about another aspect as well, which the interfaith work that Fons Vitae is doing with the world religions. In current times, there's a lot of instability, political instability and all that. And people are looking at a lot of sectarian issues. But how is it that you feel the work that Fons Vitae is doing right now is contributing, or rather you feel it's important in inculcating that sense of shared understanding between the different religions and the universality of the soul and, all of us returning back to God?
Well, certainly in the books we publish, but also we have an annual festival of faiths here in Louisville. And people from every single tradition come and deal with issues together. And we take different themes, year after year. And if you went to Festival of Faiths, you could go and see someone like Sayyidah Hussein Nasser talking with a great Hindu, or Ingrid Mattson discussing, and we have them all together with this very intent. And people come from all over the world for this. And that's an outward thing we do. And I've been on that board forever, 20, 30. I did, even for my city, I did a video called Faith in the Family. And I went to all the places of worship in this city and made footage. And we answered 3 questions. How do you view mankind? and to hear the Hindus talking about it, and the next one was, what do you do on your holy day? And then filming in the services at the synagogue, at the Buddhist temple. So it's fantastic. And lastly, what do you say as grace at table, right? And it's fantastic to see. I mean, like the Hindu family takes some of the food and they have God bless it so that it's blessed. So it's literally consecrated, and what each tradition does. And it's so wonderful. And I showed this film in Saudi Arabia. They said, oh, you mean we're all the same, But then let's say we have the Thomas Merton series. There was an American who became a Catholic named Thomas Merton, and he ended up in a monastery here in Kentucky, and he loved all the religions, and he wrote with everybody. He was involved with everybody. And so I worked with the Thomas Merton Society because he was so wonderful, and then started a series. And the first book was called Merton and Sufism, The Untold Story. He's a very famous Catholic. He wrote a book called The Seven-Story Mountain, and it sold like 7 million the first day. So he's known throughout the whole Catholic world, and people love him. People are doing doctoral theses on him. He died in 1968. He'd gone to Bangkok to a conference, and he moved a fan and got electrocuted. But he'd been down to Polonnaruwa at the bottom of Sri Lanka and sat in front of the Buddhas, and I had gone there to sit there. And he, using even Buddhist terminology, this Catholic monk, he said he could feel the Dharmakaya penetrating through everything and was at last at peace. It was very interesting. He had his moment of grace, of his full union with the divine, sitting in front of some Buddhist statues. But the first book was called Merton and Sufism, The Untold Story. And then we did Judaism, Hesychasm, the Jesus Prayer, Taoism, Buddhism is a great one. And we had a huge congress. We brought all the famous Buddhists, Bob Lowe, everyone. Now we're finishing Merton and Confucianism, and we did Merton and Protestantism and Merton and Hinduism. Those are underway right now. But these are some of the productions. And then we try to we have a spiritual affinity series with the Judaic tradition, books done by rabbis like the Pillar of Prayer, the Baal Shem Tov. So we don't have many of these titles. We don't have enough, but we're working to do this always, because I mean, that's who I am. How could I not love my brothers and sisters 100%,
MashaAllah. Sister Aisha, I think we lost visual on your
Yeah,
video.
we lost your visual, sister.
Yeah, like my phone started ringing or something. Let me turn it off.
Okay. Yeah, you're back.
No, back. It's okay.
Yeah,
It didn't ring, but I mean, it looked like it was ringing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, Sister Aisha, I think something that I felt that we want to go into and scope into is the idea of raising children, but also raising boys and girls. The idea of, now there's a lot of we really want to inculcate a sense of strength in boys and girls. Do you think there's a difference in raising them? And it's through the books, through the Ghazali Children's Project, do they address this topic differently?
Well, no, they're the same. But of course, every tradition, depending on your culture, all of that will influence how a family will raise their children, because obviously there's certain norms in any community. But I mean, we're treating the girls and boys the same with this. It's beyond sex. This is, Allah is neuter. What we're doing is every man is the universal soul, that's trying to be aware of itself. For example, in the book of fasting, I think it was, Imam al-Ghazali says, if you have a good thought, act on it immediately, because what happens is the waswisu comes right in, oh, don't help mommy. So I'll tell you a game we've developed for this. And this idea has changed my life, because I always say to children, once, it was Gay Eaton, Hassan Gay Eaton in England. He was a friend of mine, and I was living here, and he was not well. And every day I had this thought, call Sidi Hassan. And then I would think, oh, it's 5 hours ahead. It's too late. Next day, call Sidi Hassan. Oh, I can't do it right now. He'll talk a long time. The third day, call Sidi Hassan, and he died. You see, so those thoughts that come, Ghazali says our good thoughts are from the angels. And in the Book of Knowledge, he said, bad thoughts are like barking dogs in your golden heart. It scares the angels away. That's one of his metaphors. So I suddenly realized that when you have a good thought, so this is a game we play with children. You get them in a line and you have one say a good thought. And then another one sneaks up and whispers, oh, don't help mommy watch TV. They love to do this, right? And then they play a good thought, right? Well, now what I'm doing is I'm not letting them just say any thought, like help the poor. Oh, don't help the poor. As something specific in your home and school that's really going on in your life, right? So that finally they're saying their good thought and saying their thought that says don't do it. So they're starting to address it. Well, I found that since I've been talking about this good thought so much, sometimes you're thinking and you have a good thought, stop at the nursing home and visit somebody. And it's just all these other thoughts are around it, blurring. And then you switch to, oh, pick up the dry cleaning. Oh, did I get the carrots at the store? Wait, let me get rid of this. Oh gosh, I don't know what's happening here.
No worries.
I'll have to. Anyway, so just to keep talking, I've got to.
I think you have called, is it?
Yeah, well, I've gotten rid of it. So now I go.
Just click on the video icon.
Well, I'm going to have to go back to.
You can press back
to WhatsApp. Oh dear, I don't even see it.
It's okay. You can go back to the link. You can just click on the link and.
Okay, let me. Sorry, this is.
It's okay.
And this was a good part of the story too.
It's okay.
The suspense. It's a suspense.
This is
suspense.
The spiritual journey.
Wait, let me put on my glasses to even find it here.
Okay.
Oh, there you are. I don't know how it happened. Whoops.
Hey, okay, go on again. Yes.
Okay, now I'm going to try to turn it on its side.
All right.
Not have it go away.
Sure. Yes.
Okay, it worked. Okay, so.
Awesome.
We normally, our good thoughts come. Have you all noticed this in yourself? And then they get kind of blurred on the edges. Now, because I'm so aware of the good thought being whispered to, when a good thought comes, it gets like a yellow neon line around it, like, yes, do it. So now if I have a good thought, I'm afraid not to do it, right? Because it comes from the angels. Now, that's a key thing that we can all use, right? This is universal. And we've got to get everybody on that one, but practice. And once you start thinking like this, from now on, you're going to notice your good thoughts and you're going to be afraid, not to do it because the West Wisu comes right in. I don't know what you asked me, but I went off on a tangent as usual.
No, it's perfectly.
But I think what we're doing is we're giving our children tools. We're giving them tools, and the sooner, the earlier you get in, the better. Because you really, you're forming how they view everything. And if you can get your children to see, this is the reality and everything is there for me to use at the beginning. Of course, people come in at the end. I mean, I got into this later in life, but it's not natural to me. This is my spiritual life is pasted on to a long life. It's like prejudice or racism. All this gets woven in from your community and you can see through it. But you don't know how to change your original reaction because it's built into you from your community or something. And the same with ourselves, we've been so long thinking of ourselves first, and misunderstanding who we are. So if we can just get our little children going with it, it's really wonderful. And the books are designed so the Book of Knowledge and the Book of Belief are really written for younger children, of course. Nobody should be fooled. It's the deepest metaphysical realities are being presented. But then by the time we get to purification and prayer, the language went up a level because little babies aren't doing it. And then by the time zakat and fasting, higher. And the Book of Hajj, I just wrote as I would for anybody, right? But we have in the teacher's training manual, we have exercises and activities and discussions for ages 7 to 11 and 11 to 17. And then one lady, Anaba, is done for the Book of Hajj, something for children ages like 2 or 3 to 7. It's another story because we want, and which she takes the ideas from the Hajj, which can be expressed to children, because even little children are aware of death and they need to be supported from the beginning. They can't be terrified if their grandfather dies. So it's not scary. Muslims are not scared of it, but you have to present it in a good way. So we are trying with this book, which is the summation, the cap of our faith. And I never knew why until I told you what I told you a little while ago. But now I see why it is the cap of the faith. So we are trying to do something that will be available to a mother for her little children at home. My grandchildren go to a weekend school on Sundays. There's 6 mothers, and each one takes a Sunday, and they have snacks and games and crafts and the story. And then at the end of a book, they get a prize, then they finish the book of knowledge. And then schools are taking out, like in Pakistan, you have the Meme Academy, and you see kids who really have very little in these rural schools. And to see, like there's a story Ghazali gives that we are all like we're in a boat on the stream of life. And at a certain point, our boat is going to tump over when we die. And everything we've got sinks to the ground, like our toys, our, everything. The only thing that floats, the only thing that can swim is the state of your heart, right? So in Pakistan, these little girls, there they are. They've made little paper boats and they have a little stream of water and they're putting the boats and the boats are turning over. They thought that up. What people think up is amazing. There's a school called the Hub Club Academy in England, in Solihull. One of the teachers, they're all sitting in a dark room and everybody's got a candle unlit. And then one lights and then they start lighting each other and they're talking, and then they're all lit, how you share and how you pass on and how you lit. The things people are coming up. And now this particular teaching manual, we have teachers working in Dubai, in England, and America. They're all trying to put all the activities, but you can think up your own activities, because if the children don't act and play the games, it's just another lesson like school. This has to become a fun, lived reality, you see.
MashaAllah, beautifully said.
Yes, Sister Aisha, you mentioned about the different mediums that all around the world they're actually inculcating the teachings of the Al Ghazali Children's Project. How about the idea of like using music? Because in what we hear is people will have lullabies for children, mnemonic, so that they can remember things.
Wonderful.
How has the project infused like sound and music into it?
Okay, that's the assignment for Singapore. No, I'm not actually joking. Actually, I don't know what language you all speak there. Do you speak English in Singapore?
Yeah.
Okay, thank
English,
God.
yeah.
Okay, so what you're going to do is, with your great music, you're going to get kids, you're going to make songs out of some of the key ideas. Like, I got 2 hearts, right? Yeah, and they get dirty, and one of them gets dirty, and make the music. And then guess what? We will send it out, because now we've got this whole international community. And Mustafa and my son and I, we went to South Africa. They did a countrywide Ghazali festival. So we went to the 4 big cities. We presented the whole thing, 16 workshops. If we had only had songs like this, it would have been fun. So Singapore is in charge of the musical presentation of book 1 through 7. Do you accept?
Sister Aisha, Abu Sufyan is a singer.
Well, there you go. We've got our resident.
He's fated.
No, would you all do that for us?
Yeah, sure. So
because I have to tell you, there's a group in Singapore called the Little Sahaba. Do you know who they are?
Yeah, we know them. Yeah, I know
their art. The stuff they send us is the best art we've ever had.
MashaAllah.
Because we like, with the website, we're now revamping the whole website. We have to have a place to put all the art kids send. And what we're going to do in the new rendition is, for every chapter from book 1 through book 7, there's going to be a drop down. So you can go, if you're doing chapter 3 of book 2, and you can see all the ideas, footage people have sent in, children's art, people acting so that you can get ideas that might work for your community or for your family. So we're working, but we're going to put your songs. The songs are going to be on every single chapter. All right?
Inshallah. Abu Sufyan, remember that.
Oh my goodness. It's
yeah,
pressure.
No, that's it. Sorry.
Yeah, inshallah. Abu, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's very interesting that we can explore, or it's like almost like a brainstorming session almost. But I think all the things you mentioned are very interesting. But I think we want to draw back a little bit and perhaps ask you, Sister Aisha, what has been your driving force? You know, what has been your spiritual ambition in your travels? You know, in a publishing house. You know, even in the work that you do with the community. You know, what actually drives you to actually do the work that you do?
Well, two things, right? Both are sharing, and one is I'm trying to share first. Well, the first one is to present in all these different faith traditions ways to give people a leg up on how to start that spiritual journey in themselves, and to give them materials that will help them. But the other thing is, the reason we started the Text Society also is that there's no doubt that Islam has a bad reputation. Let's just say America, September 11th, you'll never undo that, right? So somewhere in everybody's mind, it's really scary, and the word Sharia is terrifying, right? Every misconception you can imagine. If you think the New York Times reports anything good about Islam, don't kid yourself. They report if somebody gets stoned and if a head gets cut off, just to keep it strong, right? So part of the message is also to try to share the spiritual dimension of Islam in such a way that people can start to appreciate it and start to bring down that level of distrust and hatred, even to the point that, like, once I was doing a lecture on the difference between Islam and Christianity, right? And it's so boring. Muslims always do it the same way. We've got 5 pillars. We always make it as like weird as we can, right? Rather than start in the court of the person you're talking to. And the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, said, adab is speaking in the language of the person you're talking to. Now, if I have a friend who's dying of cancer, I'm not going to go and tell her the Quran says. I'm going to tell her the idea. It's universal anyway, right? Anything that's true is true. So, so what I did was I said, every religion has both a doctrine and a methodology. All right. So let's just start with Christianity and Islam. All right. So in the Christian prayer of where they state it, the creed is, we believe in God the Father Almighty, maker of heaven and earth. Do Muslims not believe that? That's the same, right? Right. Then you say, well, and the Muslims believe that too, right? Blah, blah, blah. We don't believe Jesus is the only son, but then Mary, we've got more going on Mary than the Christians do. I mean, she is, imagine the woman that men and women are, the highest woman in all creation that men are supposed to copy, right? Getting down to, it ends by saying the Lord's Prayer. We believe in the communion of saints, the forgiveness of sins, the resurrection of the body, and the life everlasting. Amen. We certainly do believe in the communion of saints. Most Christian churches I know don't even believe in saints anymore. It's something Catholic and very far in a distance. Everyone believes in the forgiveness of sins, but even resurrection of the body and life everlasting. Think how many groups have let go of that because it's not scientific, that they just think death is death. So I said, comparing Islam and Christianity, the doctrine is nearly the same, except on the nature of Jesus, which I don't know of a Christian who ever thought Jesus was God. I mean, they just don't. It's just part of something they say at church. Many do. And it's a whole beautiful system. I love all of the traditions. So then I say, well, let's look at the methodology. The doctrines are nearly the same. Let's look at the methodology. All right. Prayer. All right. Now, as Christians, originally we prayed many times a day, in the fields, the matins. but now we're down to much less. And maybe just for some people on Sundays, some people once a day. But the Muslims are still doing the 5 like we did originally. Okay, then you can say the Christians. Let's look at fasting. Oh, our Lent used to be really tough, right? But now we just give up chocolate. The Muslims, look what they're doing, you see? Let's look at pilgrimage. As Christians, we used to make pilgrimages to Santiago de Compostela. That's nearly gone, right? So you go right to, and charity. Let's look at zakat. All right. Now, Christians tithe, they give 10%, you know, and but it's not everybody. Whereas in the Muslim world, even a company, even if you're Mobil Oil, you have to assess yourself the 2.5% and reinfuse that back into your country, into the economy. So it's not like the methodology is different. It's just Muslims are still, you know, we're 1400, we're 600 years later, you know, we got a later start. And you can see where Muslims are caving in all over the place on things. But I'm just saying that there are universals and among all the traditions in terms of doctrine and methodology.
MashaAllah. Sister Aisha, yeah, and also because you mentioned about universals and all that, and I think we also want to know a little bit more about, you know, your outlook on, you know, your spiritual ambition in that sense. Yeah, in that sense, because you've done so much work. I think a lot of us really admire the work that you do, you know. And I guess maybe we can go into this topic because I was thinking of just now we're talking about music, right? The idea of sound, mnemonics and all. How about the idea of using poetry? Is that something that the Al Ghazali Children's Project is inculcating?
No, that's something you all are going to do for the project. Yeah.
Oops.
Yeah, because there must be some reason destiny brought us together today, right? It's not just to have a conversation. It's that this union was meant from all eternity for your all's contribution, from your all's specialty, from your all's music and skill and poetry. We need you.
Inshallah. Abu Sufyan will work on it. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
I'm
think
sorry
Khalid
you're
will...
in. You're in. I'm sorry. I mean, Baraka Blue could help us too. I mean, you know, he's lovely.
Yeah, but what you mentioned is fated. Yeah, Abu Sufyan is one of the beautiful singer, and he always sing kasida poetry, sacred poetry on our Facebook. You can watch it, and yeah, he has a talent. Mashallah.
But I really,
sorry. Yeah.
No, I just feel that, you know, whenever qasidas are sung or even such songs,
Poetry,
and poetry, children really connect it on a different level than adults can. You know, they read, their eyes light up. You know, everything just comes alive with them. You know,
then you're
so
starting
close to
this afternoon. You're starting today. That's it.
Mashallah.
Yeah.
And you'll have fun. And you know what? Do get a group of children. You all come up with the lyrics and sing, and then we'll have underneath the words so that it's clear. Because sometimes people can't.
And you know what, Sister Aisha, a few days ago, Abu Sufyan, he was actually reading children music to me. He sent a video, but it's in Malay, of course. But yeah, he's the right person and the right time.
Astaghfirullah.
Yeah, Allah this was what Allah was doing. You see, he just wanted to use your skills. So it came this way, your skills being used to the best thing in the world, because we do need a way to get the kids where they can learn it and remember it and make it fun and all this beautiful, all these ideas, just make them simple and make them beautiful music. You know, it's like, I sometimes think what Allah was doing with me, because I sit on this couch to edit all the books right here, looking at the birds out in the backyard. Well, I thought maybe Allah was looking around and he thought, gosh, the world, the Muslims need Ghazali now, because the kids are going to just go into social media. You know, they need their religion presented in a way that's fun and deep and has meaning and purpose for them. All right. Yeah. So let's look. There's Aisha. Oh my goodness. She 55 years ago, something like that. Yeah, that long. She read Ghazali and she loved him. And then she finally, after Azhar, started publishing him, right? And she loves him. And like, gosh, but she can't even understand him, right? It's too hard for her. And she doesn't know what to do. And well, she'd be good for the Ghazali project because she already knows all the scholars who will do it, you know. And she actually is a publisher, and she actually has an international outreach. She knows everybody in the Muslim world, and she could get to them. And so we'll just run this one through her. So what he's saying to you, Abu Sufyan, is we're running this through you. Sorry, dear.
Mashallah. Sister Aisha, getting back to how you started the whole publishing and your traveling, right? And you had published so many different awliya work, the saints, the Muslim saints, and there's so many Sufism that a book that came through Fons Vitae, and we appreciate it so much and we love it so much. How is it that when you're looking back, and you were saying about looking back 50 years ago and to where you are right now, and you're still doing the work of the awliya, the saints, how was it that it changes you completely, that now that
Well,
you have reached
you see, that was the problem. I hoped it would rub off on me, you know. I mean, I remember there's a book of Ibn Ata'Allah, the one before the Lata'if al-Minan, and I read it, and it was talking about not having self-direction, and I read that maybe 20 years ago. I don't know how many years ago, when we were bringing it out, and I didn't get it, and I thought, how could I not have self-direction? But we opened tonight the story, you know, about how we didn't give ourselves anything. And that now through the Ghazali children's book, I understand there's no self-direction. We're bearing witness to our qualities being given to us on loan and being sent exactly. It's like Ibn Arabi says, God is the sender. He's the thing to whom it is sent, and he is the sending itself and what is being sent, right? So it's La ilaha illallah. And so it's only the Ghazali that's actually worked for me personally, the children's books, you know, personally. The other stuff gave me these incredible ideas and lovely stuff. You know, I mean, the Hikam of Ibn Ata'Allah is, to me, the best thing I've ever read. You know, it's just wonderful. But to be quite honest, it's having because I had to re-say this stuff for children. You can't do that if you can't understand it, right? So sometimes I would sit for days on one idea. One of the ideas was that Ghazali says in the Book of Knowledge, there are 10 things you cannot do ever, period. Like be angry, by the way. But one of them is you can't backbite, all right? And so I didn't know whether to include in that story that the Quran says it's the same as eating a person's dead flesh, right? That's really disgusting. I don't think I know of another more disgusting image in the Quran, right? Maybe there's worse, but that's the first one that comes to mind. So I wrestled with, should I put this in? And I thought, you know, it is in the Quran and kids can take it. So I put it in some pretty nice way, right? That night I went out for dinner with a bunch of girlfriends, and they were talking about another girlfriend's dad, and she wasn't there. And I chimed in with a funny, horrible story about him because I had this cool story. It was horrible. When I got in the car to drive home, I started feeling sick at my stomach. I ran in the house and I threw up. What Ghazali is saying is not a metaphor. It's true. And we're not throwing up when we do it because we are so blind and so many layers of ghafla are upon us. So then a lady called me up and she said, you know, my daughter came up to me. I was at a ladies' party and she whispered, Mom, are you all backbiting? And I said, may I speak to Lena? She was 8. She said, Auntie, until I read the chapter, my mother read it to me on backbiting. I didn't even know backbiting existed. And I'm thinking, listen to that. When I grew up, Mother would say once a week, dear, if you don't have something good to say about someone, don't say anything at all. I mean, are you kidding? We should be saying every 5 minutes, 3 times a day to everyone in our family, don't you dare speak badly about anyone. So when I have done imam training and things, I'm saying, don't ever say that group is no good. She's a kafir. They're going to hell. Don't say anything. What we should be doing is just pushing love. And the backbiting thing is out of control. And then when we came to the book of fasting, which I just finished last year or something, horror upon horror. So Ghazali, this is a hadith. Some ladies come to the Prophet, peace and blessings be upon him, and say, we're old and frail. We really can't finish the fast. It's Ramadan. We need to break our fast. And he handed them a bowl. He said, throw up in the bowl. And so in front of the horrified onlookers, they threw up pieces of flesh and blood. And he said, you had already broken your fast by backbiting. And that's hadith. And look at all of us. And you know what's happened to me now? I actually can't backbite. I physically can't do it. And so you can use these children's stories to galvanize you because they're so simple. You can read all this incredibly profound, beautiful stuff, and you need to, because these are the awliya, right? But I really recommend the children's books for like finally thinking, oh, nuts, I'm just going to do it. I mean, the thing is, you talk about 50 years ago with me or 75 or whatever it's been. There's no time. There's no age. We're all ageless and deathless. I've just been me, and I'm getting older on the outside, but nothing's happening. And I have a friend, Mahal Faisal, and you know how fast time is. I've just watched 25 years go like that, like a second. The 50 to 75 is an instant. Kumaraswamy said it's a glance. And she said to me, Maha, Aisha, she said, in one sense, because of time being non-existent, so brief, we are all already dead. So we may as well be the saints that we actually are. So what we have to do is to pretend to be who we already are. That's the sunnah. We practice who we already are until finally we start merging into it and the nafs starts to let go. That's all that we have to do. That's the whole aim of this, to be nobody, and we are nobody, to be the nobodies we really are.
MashaAllah. So profound, Abu Sufyan, we see. So beautiful.
It's just Ghazali.
But Sister Aisha, one of the other things that also capture my heart on Fons Vitae is also the video on Sheikh Ibn Atta'illah that you guys did, the old one, the video on I think the documentary on Egypt and Sheikh Ibn Atta'illah. That really captured me. That really mesmerized the way how the video was. And I think you brought it to Singapore last time you came, and I bought it one, and I keep watching it again and again.
Is that the one on the rosary, how the prayer beads are used in all the world's traditions?
No, that is another one. That is the Beads of Faith, right? That is Beads of Faith. I have that also.
Yeah. What was the name of this video?
This video, I can't remember exactly. It's a very long time ago. And subhanAllah, I really enjoyed it. And looking at how you deal with work besides publishing, right, and publication and so on, and you were mentioning about music, and then you're mentioning about the documentary, the Imam Ghazali, and I felt that you really touch with time, and that's how Awliya works. They touch with time. And when I remember that video back, and I say, subhanAllah, is how you touch with the people all the time, and how they get manifested into it, right? So my question is also like, how do you get such an inspiration in doing work with media that transmit, when people are looking into it, like, this is what I've been looking for, or this is what my journey is. And when I looked at Sheikh Ibn Atta'illah documentary, actually is the same as how you've been mentioning your whole life in this interview. Subhanallah. So what would your advice be, and what would you think about the media that is coming, like you saying that we need to touch the children, We need to get hold of them. And I know, because when you were talking, I felt that all of us are affected from our growing up also. And that's important. So I just like to hear from you also on the perspective of media. And I think Fons Vitae had done a lot of good things on media too. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I was a filmmaker after college. We had a
Inshallah.
filmmaking
No
studio on
wonder.
the Lower East Side. We did films with the Grateful Dead, and we did Janis Joplin's light shows. We did the whole 60s thing in New York, you know. So I love the work, the use of media. And I think that I did one day, I went in my father's study because I'm living in my father's house. This is the house I grew up in. And I came back, and after they died, they left me the family house. I've lived here since I was 7 years old. And so I went in his study, which is where I keep my books. And I just sat down and I thought, what am I going to do? Interfaith, right? So I wrote, it took 3 weeks, and I stayed in my Galabia for 3 weeks. And I just wrote the universal meaning of the rosary. And in the Tasbih, right? Every tradition has them, right?
Yes,
and I
yes.
went through and showed that what is being done is when you're using a divine name, the heart cannot resist the rhythmic, whether it's Allah, Ya Latif, Jesu Maria, whatever it is, the heart cannot, the name contains something of what is being named. And when it is the divine name, the heart, which is in time and space, finally succumbs, and it recognizes its theomorphic essence. And I worked, that's the best thing I personally have ever done in terms of interfaith. They made it into a book, the British, and they added stuff and changed it. But the DVD is the best part because of the music and because you get to hear everybody in their own traditions. And, the Jews don't have literally like this, but they have something called the tefillin. And they take a band and they tie it around here, and it to spell Yad, which is like the eternal. And then they have a little box right here, leather, around their forehead. And in it are the phrases, love thy God with all thy heart and all thy mind and all thy soul. That's in here. And that's what they do. And it's really funny. What's my husband was lecturing in Egypt, and someone in the audience, some of the American expats said, well, from the way you talk, it sounds like you know the truth. And he said, well, I do. And she said, well, what is it? And he said, love thy Lord with all thy heart and all thy mind and all thy soul. And they were like, what? That's it, but that's it, And so that's what they have here. But that was another way of attempting to bring people together. And then I also made a big discovery, because the Christian sacred rite of Holy Communion, right? All right. So before a Christian goes and kneels on the altar and receives the bread and the wine, which represents the Logos, Jesus is the word. I once heard someone explain that God sent to Moses, right? The word as the 10 commandments, as that, the law. And of course, that's a miracle, right? Then God sent to the Virgin Mary, right? The word, the Logos, as Sayyidina Isa alayhi salam. That's a miracle, right? God sent to Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, the Quran, which is the word, as a book to an illiterate. So there's this word. So when the Christians, before they go up to receive the word inside of themselves by drinking it, right? They first say, Lord, have mercy upon me. Christ, have mercy upon me. They empty. We say on the prayer beads, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah, astaghfirullah. You empty out the gook. Then they go to the altar and receive that word in their emptiness, and they regain their true nature, the Christ nature, the Fitra, the Buddha nature, the Adama, the Jews call it, right? The self, the Hindus call it. That's what we're talking about, the Fitra, right? So they regain it. And at that moment, when we're saying, Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad, we are reforming that emptiness on Insan al-Kamil, on true man, right? So then but then we say La ilaha illallah. And then there's neither empty cup or filled cup or reformed cup. There's only Allah. It all goes back. But when we do that, or when a Christian does that, the next stage is we are at a stage where we could return to God with nothing but the correct nature. It's all about your state of being. The whole thing is about your state of being. And if you think that, if you look at what you're doing today, this really is kind of scary. Look at some action you're doing. Your actions are reflecting your state of being. That's scary. Could I die I'm after a state of being right now. And that's a state of emptiness, right? It's really hard and we can't do it, but inshallah, Allah will help us, think of only but him. And that's why the Hajj is so good. So there you have it. It's death, resurrection, eternal life. Death of your ego, resurrection is reforming on the true self, and eternal life. Death, resurrection, eternal life. It can be called emptiness, reforming, union. That's Meister Eckhart. It's the basis of every tradition. And we have to, if you're interested in your interfaith work, understand that that's what's going on beautifully and with good niyyah in all of the traditions.
I just got the title of the video. It's the Council of Sheikh Ibn Ta'ala, excerpt from Cairo, 1,100 years of Islamic art and architecture.
It's that section. Yes.
Yeah.
That is an amazing video.
Yeah, I love that video. That changed me a lot. And that's why I thank you for that. Yeah.
Oh, well, there's a wonderful friend of mine, Caroline Williams, and she's a great specialist in medieval and they lived in Cairo with us, and her husband, John Williams, subhanAllah, mashallah, great friends. And she gives slideshows in America on Islamic art and all the periods, Mamluk, and she'd go around. But the slideshows didn't bring the sounds of the street of Cairo. It didn't bring the adhan or the doves settling in and stuff. So we got a cameraman in Cairo once and went around and filmed all of those great sites. She came to Louisville. We got an editor. We wrote a script. And then we put some music in, probably, I forget, you could hear the birds. And we really spent a whole summer working on that a long time ago, because we wanted the Cairo we knew and loved to be available with its awliya and its wonderful beings. And of course, Ibn Ta'ala, so I'm going to call her up and tell her how much it meant to you.
Thank you.
Yeah,
because I remember you bought the DVD in 2006 when you came to Singapore for the conference, and I'm the first one to board it. And when I watched it, I was like, wow.
Alhamdulillah. I'm so glad that video is alive.
And as mentioned to you just now, that when you were talking about your journey, your life, and all the things, I felt that video symbolize you. Like it really reflect the work that you do and who you really are, and how you start to travel, mashallah. And that's why
my family's been in Egypt for 95 years. So my grandfather from 25 to 52, and me straight from 69 to 79, but really still there. We don't leave Cairo,
That's why I was saying to you, like how important media is, and how your work reflects on the current state of the people. And that's how the awliya work also. They know what the people need and how to go about with them and transmitting the light, the knowledge into them. And subhanAllah, we're learning from you.
Well, that's what you all are doing by this media presentation. You're transmitting something Allah did over here to some of your friends there. It's just one. There's no place to go to or from, Once Martin Ling said to me, he said, our blessings and our trials are the same thing.
Allah.
It's like if you take a pencil and you do this back and forth. You see the pencil?
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Trials, blessings, trials, blessing. Why? To align us with our inner plumb knot line, our inner dignity of being. And if we'd only blessings, we'd be a mess. Only trials, we'd be worn down, right? So those are the same thing. That's the duality bringing us back to the center. And I remember once I was at Harvard Medical School in 1989, and the Dalai Lama was speaking. And he said, disease. He said, it's dis-ease, it's a stress. And he said, I'm not talking about the stress, you lost your job, you know, whatever it is. He said, I'm talking about the stress that we all feel when we are not aligned with our inner integrity, who we really are. And we feel it all the time. We always feel we're not quite there. And that is why we're stressed out. And that's why we're sick, because we're not being who we truly are.
Allah. I think, you know, sister, we can go on and on for 5 hours, but time doesn't permit us. But before we end, I really truly appreciate, we really appreciate being with you.
No, this is a lot of fun. And besides that, now we've got the children's musical poetry section on the way.
Yeah, before we end, right, there's some messages that I received, and one says like, one of them said like, sister Aisha, a very valuable gem, and their lives are full of learning for those on the path of seeking spiritual solace. And then another one saying that I'm admiring a woman who are doing a great job that transmit mercy and love to humanity. And they got a lot more, but yeah.
Oh, how sweet.
Yeah, so inshallah.
Oh, send them to me if you will.
Yeah, I will.
Yeah.
So my wife sends salam to you too, send her regards, and she's a bit unwell.
Well, I have looked forward to being with you all and meeting my community. And when this virus finally is gone, may I come over and hang out with you all. Yeah.
Inshallah.
Yeah,
We're always waiting for you to come, and may Allah.
No, we need a representative. We're trying, Mustafa and I, to find a representative in each country to help get this project. And you can take everything we've talked about today. I don't know whether you have a recording of it at all, and you can start to try to build a community, because we're not talking about this would be nice. We're talking about this is crucial to our children. Yeah. To get them seeing, they'll go through their lives, but they have to be armed. You know, we have to teach them the inner sunnah, you know. So why don't you all have a little committee? Maybe some of the people listening in would like to join. Maybe you can start special schools. No, I'm not kidding. You know, I mean, talk to the Sahaba people and do more, because you're a wonderful community, and you have a great museum, by the way. I went to your museum, and when we did the Merton and Buddhism book, I had the best pictures of all those incredible statues you've got in there, and it's just the Nanda snakes and stuff. You've got some great art in that. It was a great museum with the Islamic room and everything. Yeah. And your saint in the middle of town, visiting your wonderful saint, you know, Habib Noor. Yeah.
Yes. Thank you, sister. And I think we have come to an end in our interview. 1.5 hours. I think 1 hour and 45 minutes to be exact. SubhanAllah, we didn't feel time has passed by so fast.
No, there's no time.
Yeah, thank you very much. We appreciate, and we pray that Allah strengthen you, preserve your health, and you keep doing that benefits the humanity.
Ameen.
Well, we're arm in arm. We're heart and heart now. Forget arm and arm. Heart and heart. My lovely, blessed family out there. I love you all. And thank you. It makes me feel better. You know, I feel better being with you. You know, it's so lovely. Thank you.
MashaAllah. Thank you. We see you again, inshallah. Take care.
We'll see you again, Sister Aisha.
Okay, I'll try to figure out how to leave. I'll just do this. You can cut me off. That's probably
no. They will leave you. They will leave you behind. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
They will remove you.
Assalamu alaikum, my family.
Alaikum
salam. I'll try to figure out this now.
Bismillah. Alhamdulillah, we've come to the end of a very insightful discussion with Sister Aisha Gray, the founder of Fons Vitae. And we hope that it was very beneficial for those watching. And just a few announcements before we end, inshallah. Tomorrow, inshallah, we'll be having a class with Imam Abdullah Endau on the Tafsir Surah Al-Waqiyah. That will be at 10 p.m., inshallah, 10 p.m. So do catch us on Facebook Live. Again, it's a series, so you can actually join us every week, inshallah. And also, South Ilahi is still pushing for the Qurban project. We are looking for people, who are interested to contribute to the Quran project in Senegal, in West Africa. So our posters are out on social media, Facebook and Instagram. You can check out the prices for the sheep, the cow, and the goats. And there's also a number for you to contact if you have any questions. And and that's it. And please pray for us, our volunteers, our founders, Sidi Khalid, Saida Ainun, and also pray for all our scholars and our guests that come on the show. And with that, thank you so much. May Allah accept it. May Allah forgive all of us. Forgive us for any shortcoming. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi ta'ala wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace out.